And I'm so pleased to welcome Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, and Dr. David Wormser, Senior Analyst, Middle East Affairs, Center for Security Policy. Greetings, gentlemen.
Hey, David, I've got a question for you. Do you know any universities, the kind that give AOC degrees and stuff? Do you know any universities that I could apply to have them just send me a PhD without having to do any work? Just a lifetime achievement award.
Well, you have to do a little bit of work.
Then I can be a doctor.
You have to do a little bit of work. You have to burn a flag. You have to chant death to America. Or yeah, it's not totally without work, but yeah.
If I promise to lead a peaceful protest on campus, would they give me a degree?
Well, I think it's wonderful at a place like Columbia. You pay $80,000 tuition and you don't even have a final exam. I mean, if I were a parent of a kid, I'd pull them out of these schools because you're certainly not getting your money's worth. I think there's two things happening with the universities. First of all, I think Americans are beginning to realize that this elitist haughtiness of academia, especially the most elite levels of those institutions, have gone bad. It's not only a question of you're not getting your money's worth, but you're actually learning. Your kids are learning to be corrupted and to get good in a bad way that actually guarantees their lack of success in life, rather than their success in life.
I think that's true, but I think I was asked this on a show this morning, and I'm going to say, I think this is a huge opportunity for Republican governors, Republican attorney generals, Republicans who care about education, because what it's revealed is the result of the rot, the academic rot that we've allowed to exist. And we don't need to explain it to anybody anymore. They all see it now. And so if you want to actually go in and clean up the higher education system, and you're the governor of a state, you have you can go in and say, we're cleaning this mess up. This stuff will not be allowed to stand. And you can put in new people to run it. You can basically tell the professors and you can tell the administrators that don't have tenure, you're gone. And if you support this stuff, and you can rearrange the curricula to make sure that it doesn't get fomented on campus.
Higher education.
We have to look at this as an opportunity and not just as an alarm.
I think it's an opportunity on two levels. One is, higher education is critical for a modern functioning society, but it's being hijacked and destroyed. And that therefore, one issue is exactly like you say, Americans now know what the threat is on that level. The second point is, I've noticed, for those of us who are old enough to have lived through the 1970s, you're beginning to feel something happen. When these rioters burned American flags and young, clean-cut Americans show up and they start chanting USA, USA, and want nothing more than to just put the American flag back up on a flagpole, and that president of the university in North Carolina gave his little talk where he said, that flag defends the freedom that allows everybody here to demonstrate, and so on and so forth, and ordered the troops to.
Oh, there he goes. Yeah, I think you're exactly right.
Same sort of feeling I had in 78, 79, where people were out there chanting USA, USA, after the Ayatollahs took our embassy hostage and dragged our name through the mud. I feel something brewing among our youth on the campuses, and with it, a new leadership seems to be emerging. And I see it also, by the way, I see it also in the Jewish community. The Jewish leadership has catastrophically failed. It's on their watch. They made their peace, the establishment Jewish leadership, they made their peace with the liberal left. They thought it would protect them, and look what they got. And they're just paralyzed. Everything that they've built has collapsed. And you see these 20-something-year-old Jews out there on the campuses going and putting the American flag back up, flying the Israeli flag in their face, giving these speeches, uniting with the Iranian Americans to go beat up some of these protesters. There's no apology. There's a confidence, and it's now fusing with the larger American youth who are saying, we're done with this. Well, you've thrown away our generation. You can't do that. So I think what's happening here is you're seeing a group of people, whether it's young Jews and young Americans, non-Jewish Americans, beginning to take back their country. And
I think that's right.
Is appearing before our eyes.
Feels that way. You know, I can. One of the things that always astonishes me is these Iranian agents who are working on our college campuses and are promoting Iran's agenda. They think they're promoting Gaza, but they're really promoting Iran's agenda. We're the foremost haters of Israel in the Middle East, even though they're really kind of not in the Middle East. But I find it interesting that these guys have completely ignored what's happened in Iran to students who stood up to that country's regime, which never doesn't have real elections, that essentially took over in a revolution and has effectively beaten people bloody to make sure they hold power. Nobody seems to be concerned of what happens to the students in Iran who stand up and say, wait a second, this is nuts. What happens to those students is they get killed, they get murdered. You could be an internationally known freedom fighter on campuses. You could be on the left, you could be on the right. Doesn't matter. You could be internationally known, you could be murdered, and there are no repercussions whatsoever. So these so-called freedom fighters who want to have just established democracy, perhaps they should focus a little bit in terms of what some of their benefactors and sponsors are actually doing. I mean, educating them about what the tyrants that Hamas are is, anybody who can look at what happened on October 7 and ignore it. I don't think they're educatable in that. But the fact of the matter is, from a moral high ground perspective, I take a look. If I was a college student, I'd be taking a look at what happens in Iran to students who stand up and do those exact kind of programs. There is
one group that is looking at that, and there's hundreds of thousands of Iranian Americans, and of that hundreds of thousands, they're very highly educated, and very few of them are in these riots. The opposite, they're showing up in the pro-Israeli demonstrations, and they're showing up now beating up some of these rioters. Why? Because they see it. They see this as what happened to them in Iran. They understand what the Iranian government does. They remember what they did on the university campuses. They remember when they attacked and burned down movie theaters. They know what they see. And this is what they ran away from. So when they see these Hamas people on campus, they see the Iranian regime that they fled. And just like, you'll see these people that had fled Russia are the greatest anti-communists and the biggest, some of those who warn us the most about Putin and so forth. These Iranians are the same. They know who they're dealing with. And that's why they're showing up at these pro-Israeli demonstrations, waving Israeli and royal Iranian flags, not the Islamic Revolution flags. They're showing up at these demonstrations, beating up some of the rioters and so on and so forth. That they know what they're dealing with.
Well, and this isn't just an Islamic uprising. This is also backed by communist forces as well. And when I had Pastor Vitali and Marina and their son Daniel on from the Ukraine this morning, they lived 20 years in Russia and 20 years in Ukraine, and they talked about how this, the Russians basically, when they took over Crimea, they armed these kinds of groups. The Russians armed them and then set them loose on the citizens of Crimea in the same way that this is happening right here and right now in our own country. And let's not forget, what happened in the summer of 2020, right? When they had U-Haul trucks and different trucks set around the country full of weaponry that these Antifa individuals accessed before they went out into the streets and started creating the havoc that they created and burning buildings and attacking innocent citizenry. This is all staged, and we really do need to understand it. And I agree with you, David. I'm glad to see that we have some students that are waking up to this. I'm grateful for somebody like a Charlie Kirk who's been talking about these kinds of things and trying to rally a college element together to get them to kind of look and see some of this stuff.
Yeah. And people we don't know.
Well, I think there's a certain amount of bravery that's required to be able to do that, because if you're a political science major, okay, maybe if you're an engineering major, you don't have a professor. Your professors aren't predominantly marching out with the violent demonstrators. But if you're a political science major, if you're in one of the liberal arts majors, you are risking your ability to get a grade. You're risking your ability to graduate by going and standing up against it. And I'm old. I hate to admit how old I am, even older than Greg. But it's but I was actually on the USC campus, University of Southern California campus, in 1978 when the Iranian takeover of the U.S. embassy occurred, and my next door neighbors were Iranian students, and our administration came out, because a lot of people were demonstrating against Iran, and our administration came out and made it very clear: you will not isolate and attack students. You will respect everybody on this campus. And that was a very direct statement right off the bat after the first day of a demonstration, which occurred exactly where they're currently encamped right for this latest little thing, and on the USC campus. Mm-hmm. It's the exact same location. The difference is the president of USC at the time said, you will not, even though it was American interests, you will not disrupt other students or in any way make this into an attack on different students from different nationalities. And it really made it so it was first of all, the energy went out of it because they were attacked. The onus was put on them. It was an exact example what Columbia and elsewhere should have done. They should have said, if you have a disagreement on policy, that's one thing. You will not personalize this against the individual students here. You will not go and attack people. You will be put in a place where you don't disrupt the education system here. And if you try to do that, we're going to boot you off campus. That's a very simple message that the education leaders who actually gave that message put down the problem immediately. You look at Pomona College. There's a video on what the Pomona College president did in confronting these demonstrators, versus Columbia, where basically they said they fed the demonstration, they fed it, and they just kept feeding it and enabling it. Yeah. And and given the fact that many of these administrators come out of the 60s, 70 protest movements, they're going, oh yay, we're back to the good old days of taking over campuses.
Well, the only trouble you're going to get into right now is if you provoke the protesters. Right. The protesters can say what they want. They're going to be allowed to do what they do, including taking over libraries and filtering out people who aren't revolutionaries. Right. So that during finals week, by the way, meaning, you're going to fail your final because you can't even get to the library. If you're not a revolutionary, and so they're basically destroying the freedom of other students to even just mind their own business. But if you're one, but if you're one of those,
University of Mississippi right now is looking at throwing two students off campus because they offended the demonstrators on campus. They're not going to, and this is Mississippi. They're not going to tolerate, and the headline was discrimination in Mississippi, and the ACLU came in, and NAACP came in, said, oh, we got discrimination in the University of Mississippi. Well, what these two students apparently did is they said some things that weren't complimentary about the people who were demonstrating, and as a result, those students are in danger of being thrown out. The students are sitting there saying, we want to kill all the Jews. Oh, that's fine. No problem there. It's a saying, it's just, you look at this and, the world's upside down. But once again, this is an instance where, in Mississippi, the governor should go in and say to the administrators, you need to get this under control. And if you're going to prosecute and you're going to throw kids out who stood up against this, and you darn well better throw out the ones who've been engaged in it. Because freedom of speech has to work both ways, folks.
One law for all. Yeah, exactly. That's the issue here. But that's exactly what the left, the radical progressives, don't want. I mean, the whole point of DEI and everything is that there is a need to have racism, a need to have discrimination just for the right cause. As long as it's the right cause, it's a good thing.
Oh.
That's their basic point.
I think that's it to a degree. I think the other part, and I know we're going to run out of time here in a minute, but I think the other part to that is also it is designed to divide us. It's not choosing sides just to choose sides. It's choosing sides in hopes that they will create enough chaos to cause the entire system to implode. Ultimately that is the goal. The goal is to destroy and create chaos. So they've got to allow a side to push the envelope so far that the other side is going to react to it. And then in the midst of all of the reaction, now they've got what they really want, because we know the elite do not care about the chattel that's on the street. They don't care about these students. They don't give two rips about the students that are in these little encampments. If every one of those students in those encampments was wiped out tomorrow, they would be just as happy. Right. As oppressing the others. It doesn't matter to them, because none of our lives matter to them. As far as they're concerned, we're too stupid to take care of ourselves. They came out, what was it, Grabowski, that professor that came out under Obama that basically said that y'all are a bunch of idiots. We that's what we think about you. And bottom line is that we could figure out how to get you all to kill one another and wipe yourselves out. That's really what we'd like to see happen here.
I think I'm a little more even cynical than that, believe it or not.
Wow.
We see, now you got me all locked up here. I got to figure out how to outdo that.
Well, listen, we've seen this over the last 6 years. They've created a political shock force that's designed to intimidate, is designed to attack, it's designed to create an environment where no one dares stand against it. They did it in Washington, D.C. in 2020. They did it against the Trump campaign in 2016. Trump campaign had to cancel a rally in Chicago because the city of Chicago said we can't protect the people attending the rally. Donald Trump had to walk through drainage ditches to get to the San Jose Convention Center to speak to the Republican Party of California, because the San Jose police wouldn't clear the way, and so Donald Trump, they were there to try to attack Donald Trump. So this is not new. But the problem we have now is it's gotten much more sophisticated. The communication networks are much more intact, and they now have enough practice in terms of doing this that they're no longer rabble. They are a trained shock force army that can mobilize at a moment's notice. That's what's different. That's what's dangerous, and that is what ultimately becomes the biggest threat. Because when the left defines Donald Trump as being a threat to democracy, and democracy is the one thing that must be protected at all costs, even though they don't know what the word means. It becomes clear, and in a world where you don't believe in absolute truth, you don't believe in God, and you are in fact the end justifies the means, we are creating a very, very dangerous world for anybody to try to exist in as a political opposition to what they believe. And that is if there's one thing that really is designed to destroy this country, it is that. And that's what they're doing. It's intentional. Cultural Marxism is they're in their revolutionary stage. They believe they can effect a revolution and win. And we damn well better beat them now, because we won't get another shot.